as usual, is kind of hard for me because I really prefer freeform, but Herman and his crew have always educated me that when I go freeform, I just kind of go over time, I forget about time, and then I rush at the end. So I'm really trying to be disciplined and follow some of the models before me. And so I'm going to read something that I put together that is my rendition of what integral religion is from the point of view of Theosophy. If by any chance you get a little lost or it's not making sense, all you have to do is look at what we're doing. And the pamphlet talks about the fact that we're looking at the essence of things, recognizing the intermediate interconnections between things, and process and manifestation. Or this was really based on the three fundamental propositions, so you can think about those. Or you can think about the 7 stanzas, because the flow is actually from the stanzas themselves. So let's try this. Religion is that which is sacred and that which makes sacred by acts and devotion. It is a binding or being bound to or in that which is divine. Theosophically, the ability to know God, in quotes, one's higher self or spiritual ego, depending upon plane, depth of understanding, and experiential encounter, is the ability to consciously recognize one's unity as and with the one eternal root and its supremely divine essence as causal power. A power generative and productive which outbreathes and subsequently regulates the expansion, growth, and development of the universe with its infinite geometry of objects and forms, according to its immutable eternal laws for the divine awakening of the spiritual soul or imperishable monad. It is this power, one with the monad, that is the cause of awakening to the totality of wisdom in the cosmic cycle and drama of universal life and existence allowable to monastic man or woman. Regarding the idea of integral religion, HPB says, to say Theosophy is not a religion by no means excludes the fact that Theosophy is religion itself. A religion in the true and only correct sense is a bond uniting men together, not a particular set of dogmas and beliefs. Now, religion per se, in its widest meaning, is that which binds not only all men, but also all beings and all things in the entire universe into one grand whole. This is our theosophical definition of religion. That was from HPB. Theosophy as an integral wisdom religion is an exhaustless body of knowledge. It helps awaken the understanding that subsequently leads to a conscious love and embrace of the boundless presence of life, eternally pulsating, unconscious, and perhaps even non-existent to our perception due to its prolific depths of darkness. Its wisdom represents the full range of life, inclusive of all, from the unmentionable to the absolute unity, followed by the infinite diversity of life, and an eventual return after lessons learnt through assimilation of essence with essence. How do we begin to understand unity as an infinitely inclusive, integral diversity, or one life. By using the secret doctrine, the stanzas applied to cosmos and being, it tells us the following. Deific darkness is the eternal, immutable root, the great breath in its various phases, supreme as cause, boundless, impersonal, and without the possibility of qualification by names or forms. It is neither immortal nor mortal, only alone in duration. As cause, it is the origin and repository of the one life ray, of the Logos, which adopts illumination to make itself visibly felt, then known in the heart of all receptive beings. It is the light embracing the seed of religion, science, and philosophy, which becomes the totality of life as beingness, being, and becoming, in and as manifestation and existence. From within this eternal matrix in which the sources of light appear and disappear, arises isness, beingness, and finally being as ego in all caps, and the apparent fullness of the universal plenum. All minds, all beings, all things are intimately embraced within this circle of life, made manifest with but a minuscule point of its own reflective nature, itself remaining unaltered and undiminished. As such, this life, its continuity, as such, this life, its source and manifestation is the fully inclusive field of integral existence in its gestation, beginning, continuity, and dissolution. It is connected in every way and at every level or plane of being, non-consubstantial, yet always in coadunition, all resting within the condition of non-being, void, and darkness, which is yet absolute light. And this is the essence of our being. In the proem of the secret doctrine, we are told that upon the dull black ground or darkness appears the fullness of an immaculate, circumscribed circle of life, and that the same circle within which, at its center, is a point capable of metaphorical germination and fertilization. The point represents potential space in abstract space, through which arises the one life ray, the first unmanifest logos, the divine active germ of all things to be, whose light is Devi Prakriti. This light is the germ which becomes the manifestation of, and afterwards the repository for, all things. It is this divine logoic light which is able to manifest itself as all things by threading through and becoming all things until the end of the Mahamanvantaric life cycle. This light itself is a manifest condition of the pervasive omniscience resonant as an intelligible field and force, which can be seen as the electrifying thread or current of life. As thread, it becomes all things, and at the level of Fohat, by tying itself into variously sized and shaped groupings of knots, the knots of Fohat, becoming in turn the basis for the appearance of all objectivity reflected from the universal wisdom upheld in the divine thought and mind. The importance of this lies in the idea that deity, light, divine mind, and logos are the very essence of existence as the imperishable monad of universal life, whose reflection becomes the monadic heart of and in the core of every living being. It is the threefold fundamental propositions of our being and the cause of our presence. This was simply an application of the first four stanzas to the nature of our being. She goes on to tell us, as she explains the other stanzas, through the activity of the Logos is manifest the septenary hierarchy of conscious divine powers, and at this stage, through them, the phohatic aspect of that same luminous logoic force, field, and light. And here we have the beginning of the entire array of those 10 billion things that we call the objects in life. Phohat, the messenger of the Dhyanis, hardens the atoms while threading through and becoming all things by tying itself into knots. It is these knots that become the points, the lines, the triangles, the cubes, the particles, the atoms, the molecules, and structural forms in universal life, thus manifesting the intelligent laws of sacred geometry around and within the matrix of each monadic center. It is according to such laws that all things are karmically and harmoniously balanced during the monadic evolutionary journey through the totality of the integrally related manifestation. All the while, each monad having the capacity to lift and awaken all life during its sacred journey, to attain to the conscious realization of our monadic godhood and the wisdom and knowledge which goes along with the responsibility of such godlike awakening. The important points so far are that we are the imperishable monad, not the phenomenal appearance, universally and individually. And within us, reflective of the three fundamentals, is the deific ground as the great breath, the law with its operation, the logoic light with its resonantly intelligent power, and the creative evolutionary force acting within and behind all life and manifestation. All of this being one life power, seen through the conceptual difference of name, form, and function. We are the universe, and the universe is us. Yet what is this infinite diversity of life, and how does it relate to integral religion? Concerning the dynamic appearance of the millions of things in existence, with the time allowed, we can only give an example of the range and flow, the unfolding of the inclusive arisal of all things in manifestation within and as the one life, all the while still remaining in a state of eternal nowness. For the sake of brevity, we simply made a list of the things that are caught in between the absolute aspect of our being and the process of return. And if we follow HPB's thread in The Secret Doctrine, she educates us about the absolute and its coeval law, the eternal pulse of the great breath as the basis of all cycles, pulses, and life breath, breath as the transformative power of the tattvas at every level of being, Parabrahm, Mula Prakriti, divine mind and its power of thought, light as the omniscient intelligible force behind, within, and working throughout all life, the Lipika as the agents of reflection related to the laws of divine mind, the great Laya centers and unified robes of space, the threefold logos and its eventual manifestation as Brahma, Viraj, and Vak, the synthetic aggregate of dhyanis and the subsequent presence as the 7 dhyan chohans, the ahi of and as manifesting through Foha, the messenger of the dhyanis, and as that force which hardens the atoms, making all manifestation possible. The Akashic heights, followed by the highest astral light, known as the tamatras, the subtle rudiments of all sensory-based experience, with its lower 36 or 49 tattvas, depending upon how you're looking at it, all working to manifest cosmos. These may be referred to, as HPB does at times, the causal, the very subtle, the subtle, and the gross motions leading to aggregates, or the arupic, the kamic, and the material, or if we're looking at states in coadjunction, the archetypal, the intelligently creative, the formative, and the manifest planes, the forces, the properties, and the factors that are related to our very life and the way we live. From this state of affairs, the teachings go on to explain in algebraic formulation the manifestation of all things from nebulas to galaxies to solar systems to the globes, to the elements that are terrestrially made, to the elements that are cosmically formed, to the continents, to the kingdoms, to the animals, to the intelligences. And then she gives us an entire genealogy of those higher intelligences that are related to the awakening of mind and manas. And she talks about the sacredness of the Nirmanakayas from the prior Manvantaras that are, in fact, our instructors as those beings and forces as well as powers that awaken our minds when we are ready. And so what does all of this, as the middle ground, have to do with integral religion? Most of the true seers, and the idea was mentioned early, have a living vision of this integral totality. That vision is possible because of the nature of the logoic light that is inherent within the very monadic essence of our being. When we are at a point where we can allow its arisal without the obstruction. And so very often we are asked, how does that happen? How do you do that? Well, then we move on to what our teachers told us in the great Master's letter. The path is one, the means are many. And so to encapsulate not so much details of practice and details of meditation and focusing on things. If you've done a calculated study of meditation, you recognize that the entire spectrum is something like this. Our lifelong meditative transformation begins with an understanding leading to a mastery of the elemental lives, the elements, the objects that arise as a result of the elements, the bodies that are made of the elements, the senses that are made by those elements, the sensory processes that are involved in the sensory-based understanding of objective life, the inner psychic elements and supports, mastering gross mentation, i.e. just your everyday thoughts, morals, ethics, views, the proper philosophy of understanding in terms of following your own path that you develop in the pursuit of this awakening. Looking at the higher mind with its causal mentation, then the sense of ahamkaric identification, its misidentification as I am this and not that, the samskaric potencies that give rise to the skandhas that form the very vehicles that we use as lights of intelligence in order to experience the world. We look towards the Buddhic mind, the mastery of the Buddhic, looking outwards, as Madame Blavatsky calls it, and then Buddhi looking inwards, as she brings our attention to. And then we watch, as they say in Patanjali's yoga aphorisms, the crumbling and mastery of the influences of the gunas, and we resolve them back into the prakritic field from which they came. And then we begin to recognize the difference between soul and nature. And that's at every level of our being. And so in Patanjali, the basic outline he gives, or it gives, or she gives, is a movement through the argumentative stage, the deliberative stage, the beatific stage, and the egotistical stage. And there are stages, as Mr. Judge says, that are beyond that clearly relate to the inner awakening. And then we finally reach a point where Patanjali speaks about that vision, which is noted as the Dharma Mega vision. And it is the truly integral vision of all of these things that we have mentioned in outline, in living color. It's the vision that Krishna provided Arjuna with that disturbed his stability, because he had not reached a point where he could integrate that nor concentrate on the distinct parts as related to the whole without getting lost. And so the power of contemplation in addition to the awakening of these things are all of which become necessary. And we can't forget the ethical and moral side, which has to do with the performance of all duty, shunning none, cultivation of morality, ethics, study, understanding the role of the gunas in terms of limiting the light that is within us, understanding the nature of karma and how it unfolds and how obstructions become the very things that we need in order to shake loose the shackles that bind the light within us. Working continuously to free oneself from the influence of the principles as well as the gunas, moving beyond desire, passion, anxiety, fear, anger, confusion, thereby protecting, as Krishna says in the Gita, the mind from the loss of discrimination. Because up to a certain point, discrimination is extremely necessary to make one's way through this integrate path. And at a certain point thereafter, discrimination is very necessary to drop, because there is only one life, and if we're discriminating within the vision of that one life, then we haven't experienced the totality of an integral religion. The path, the practice, and the awakening to the state of true religion as relegare are demonstrated, in the works as the Gita, Patanjali's Yoga Aphorisms, The Voice of the Silence, The Light on the Path, a proper reading and understanding of Tantra's teachings, the Mahayana, the Yogacara, and the Secret Doctrine itself, which is a masterpiece book in regards to the directions that should be followed. Such a practice changes the resonance and function of soul and mind with its vehicular bodies and resonant frequencies, such that the highest light of reality and truth is able to fully reveal itself and reflect within the consciousness of the monadic being, not the consciousness of the brain, dramatically altering one's way of life with its seeking, knowing, understanding, and subsequently selective service in the world. It is perhaps in this way that we realize the oneness of life and that bond that Madame Blavatsky spoke about, which, and I'll repeat her quote, binds not only all men, but also all beings and all things in the entire universe into one grand whole. This being the Theosophical definition of religion. Thank you.
Let's take the time for just a few questions, maybe one or two questions, if there are any. Everything clear?
Why should there be any questions? Oh, you again.
You're not going to get it off that easy, are you? So it seems like she gives the entire, definition of the creation of the universe, the logos, the mula prakriti, etc. And she went through the entire gambit of it. And fundamentally, to me, it says that she tells us that X, Y, and Z happened, but she doesn't tell us how it happened.
Yes, she
In
did.
other words, well, you have a solar system with planets revolving around it. They've been doing it for a couple of billion years now, 4.6 or so, give or take a few.
Mm-hmm.
She doesn't tell me how it's happening and why. I mean, I'm looking at a perfect perpetual motion machine here, and I don't know how it works. It bothers me. Where is the explanation?
Well, where is the explanation? And again, I mean, as it was mentioned in the first talk, the wonderful thing about Theosophy is not going to say this, that, or the other, and not this and not that or the other. The purpose of even just the secret doctrine is to destroy your mindset to the point where you can open it to the truth.
I'm destroyed.
Okay.
I'm fully destroyed.
And even though it sounds funny, it's important because when you begin to, again, that expression she uses, booty facing inwards versus booty facing outwards, when you've gotten rid of the things that obstruct deep understanding, that resonance begins to occur. You subsequently begin to find words to describe a process. And then you check that process with the SD, then you check that process with modern science. And what you find out is that the process is ahead of the science. So when you're talking about the cause and the effect and understanding the details, they tell you, we didn't give you the details. We gave you general principles. We gave you, if you read the secret doctrine correctly, the forces that were already mentioned, the Parasakti, the Jnana Sakti, the Kundalini Sakti, the Mantra Sakti, and the Icha Sakti, etc., as related to our being in terms of using that to come to using the language that will fit the description. So on the one hand, we can talk prose and describe philosophically what's in the secret doctrine. What you're looking for is the underlying resonance, mathematics, and vibrations that you will subsequently have to change into equations and subsequently into language in order to share that with individuals if you're looking for deep process. If you're looking for general description, we can do that because in the secret doctrine also she tells us about the forces of attraction and repulsion and rotation and gravitation in terms of its limitations. Then she speaks about the intelligence that's inherent within the substance that has its own pulsatory nature that takes on that great polarity that was spoken about earlier for the very purpose of generating aggregations, which then ends up forming suns, out of which comes planets and comets and things of that nature. So if you really, really want to know, there's a path there.
How do we contact that intelligence?
911. I'm sorry.
Last question.
You stress you might say, the esoteric process of spirituality, illumination. But what about ritual? Because a lot of people associate religion with ritual. Is that stuff you just got to throw away and make sure it's not mucking up your head?
Okay, so two things. One, the esoteric, and I don't, I just want to take a little bit of time to say that I don't think what I expressed was the esoteric version of, only because this was the translation a little bit of what's already there. So I believe that there's a deeper message there. But in terms of the rituals, the ceremonies, and the rites, if you need rituals, use rituals. If you need ceremonies, use ceremonies. But when it comes to the way I understand what some of the teachers have said in the Mahatma letters, ceremonies, rituals, and rites are another skandic limitation that people end up believing in that, yes, distorts the mind. And the one thing that we're trying to get away from enzymatically, in terms of destroying, literally, they have a yoga that they call Laya Yoga. And part of that was expressed here when we're literally going backwards and undoing everything that's been done in conscious awareness of that in order to understand process. And so when you're doing that, there is no ceremony. You can do things that will externally show in symbolic form a process that you can only guesstimate. Just like Madame Blavatsky tells us, we are simply the symbols of what we really are. But when it comes to really destroying yourself, and I'm using that in quotes, then there is no need for ritual, there is no need for rites. There is a need for clear understanding in what needs to be done to undo the processes that have limited us in incarnation. And so that we can make those transparent. It's not that we escape karma or anything like that, but it's just that that higher light of mind that was spoken about, and that, Jonathan, you're always talking about in terms of genius, simply overwhelms brain function to such a degree that you're here and you're not here. Yeah. And one of the end points is, in agreement with what you had said, is when those things are occurring, and again, you're not looking for ceremonies, you're not looking for any rites and you know, that's superfluous to the actual encounter, because when you're there, none of this exists. And it becomes necessary to bring that which is always there in everything that we do, and share that in everything that we do. And so in part, that binding back, that bonding, as HPB says, is about communicating that impulse, communicating that motion, and communicating that breath, and sharing it with anyone and everyone. So if we need ceremonies and rites and rituals, give it to them, because that's where their headsets are in terms of what they think they need to hold on to in order to move to a certain level. But if you don't, and you are really ready to dive into the ocean of Theosophy at its shallow shores and deepest depths and lose yourself in the process, welcome.
Okay.
Thank
you, Eugene.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.